You didn't even notice the exact moment it happened. There was no dramatic break, no loud realization, just a quiet pause. At first, it felt like exhaustion, then apathy, then a strange kind of stillness that wasn't rest, but also wasn't resistance. You kept doing what you were supposed to. You replied to messages, you showed up, you said the right things in the right tone at the right time. But behind the curtain of daily function, something within you went silent. Not broken, just unplugged. You didn't lose yourself. You simply stopped echoing back a version of reality that no longer fits your signal. There's a version of you that once could override this silence with performance. You could conjure energy out of nowhere. You could force excitement. You could fake presence. But this time, your nervous system isn't playing along. And that is new. You're not stuck. You're not numb. You're in a different space now, a space between versions, between fields, between frequencies, where the world still spins, but not in your rhythm, where conversations still flow, but don't land, where motivation still exists, but doesn't reach you. And maybe that's the part you haven't named yet. You're not tired because you did too much. You're tired because you're carrying a frequency you no longer align with. And your body, your breath, your soul, they've all stopped pretending. They've stopped pretending that urgency is purpose, that productivity is presence, that surviving is the same as living. What you're experiencing now isn't confusion, it's contrast. The contrast between the world you performed for and the world that's starting to resonate beneath your skin. And the deeper you feel into that dissonance, the more it becomes clear. You're not here to continue a version of you that only existed for survival. You're here to remember who you are without the distortion. The first instinct is to question it, to wonder why you're no longer motivated by what once lit a fire in you, why familiar places feel foreign, why simple tasks now feel like dragging your spirit through wet concrete. You think maybe something is wrong, maybe you've regressed, maybe you're disconnected, maybe you're falling behind. But here's the deeper truth. You didn't fall behind. You fell out of performance. That doesn't mean you stopped functioning. It means you stopped rehearsing, stopped repeating the version of yourself that knew how to survive systems built on pressure, praise, and productivity. Because when the performance is no longer necessary, the exhaustion doesn't come from what you do. It comes from pretending you still need to do it that way. You weren't lazy. You weren't lost. You were being retuned. Your frequency, once adapted to distortion, to urgency, expectation, shapeshifting, has started to uncoil. At first, it's disorienting. You wake up and feel blank. You can't explain why you want to cry. You sit in conversations that used to matter, and all you hear is static. This isn't depression. This is emergence. And emergence is rarely loud. It's not a breakthrough with fireworks. It's a slow unfolding, a sacred unraveling. Your nervous system, which once flinched at stillness and silence, now craves it. Not because you're broken, but because you're done broadcasting what you no longer are. That version of you who knew how to hustle to be safe, to be enough, they weren't fake. They were wise. They built a life within distortion, and they made it work. But now, you're stepping outside that frequency. And that transition, it's not smooth, it's not comfortable, but it is truthful. You start noticing the subtle signs. You no longer push yourself into rooms where your soul feels absent. You don't apologize for needing space. You stop over-explaining. These aren't changes of behavior. They are evidence of a deeper recalibration. You're not upgrading. You're remembering, not reaching higher, but coming back inward, to the original resonance that was always yours before the performance began. And the silence you feel now, it's not emptiness. It's spaciousness, room for the real signal to come through. There's a moment in every transformation where the world begins to blur. Not because your vision is failing, but because the lens you use to look through no longer aligns with the truth vibrating in your body. Things don't feel real anymore because they were never built on resonance to begin with. You feel ungrounded, not because you've lost your path, but because the path you once walked was paved by a version of you who chose safety over soul. Now, the blueprint is fading. Your senses are still working. Your intellect is still intact. But your system no longer responds to what once stimulated it: goals, obligations, dynamics that used to define you. You try to care, but your energy refuses. You try to show up, but your field doesn't move. You're not failing, You're decomposing a false self. And in the middle of this collapse, the mind screams for clarity. What's happening to me? Why can't I just go back? But you don't want to go back. You want to feel something real, and your system knows that can't happen by reconstructing a facade. So it pauses. It halts your momentum not to destroy you, but to save you from continuing on a trajectory you've already outgrown. This is the space where most people give up because they mistake emptiness for error. This pause is not a problem. It's precision. It's the intelligence of your body saying, we're not doing this anymore. Not from burnout, from coherence. You'll try to fix it. You'll make new plans, chase a new high, force a new identity. But none of it will land because your energy is no longer available for construction built on distortion. And that's terrifying until you realize it's liberation. You were never meant to sustain a life that drained your spirit just to appear successful. You were meant to feel alive. The false identity was rooted in urgency. Be faster, do more, achieve something. But the emerging self moves differently. It values breath. It listens before it speaks. It refuses to participate in what doesn't feel sacred. It doesn't perform clarity. It waits for resonance. And that waiting, that stillness, it feels unbearable because you were conditioned to believe that movement is safety. But real safety is resonance. Real stability is the ability to feel your truth and not abandon it for belonging. This is not the void, it's the threshold, the edge where the old dissolves and the new hasn't fully landed. And in this space, you don't need more information, you need integration. You need to stop arguing with what's fading and start honoring what's surfacing. The part of you that doesn't chase, doesn't grasp, doesn't shapeshift. The part of you that watches, breathes, and waits for something real to arrive. And it will. Not with noise, but with vibration. A subtle hum that your system will recognize, not because it's grand, but because it's honest. And in that moment, you'll stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start realizing this is the part where I stop betraying myself. You haven't lost your way. You've lost your agreement with distortion. And that is the first step back to real power. Your mind may still be clinging to logic, to timelines, to reason, but your body has already moved on. This is the part no one prepares you for. The part where your body begins detoxing not just chemicals, but expectations, personas, and timelines that were never yours to begin with. The heaviness in your chest, that's not failure. That's the residue of all the times you said yes when your nervous system screamed no. The fog in your brain, that's not confusion. That's your field untangling from scripts written by survival, not soul. You wake up tired not because you slept wrong, but because your body spent the night processing contracts you never meant to sign. Energetic agreements with performance, silence, invisibility. You walk into familiar places and feel foreign, not because you've changed too much, but because you finally see how small you had to become just to fit in. This isn't depression. It's a disconnection from distortion. It's the sacred unraveling of everything false you once called normal. And it will feel like malfunction. You'll try to function the way you always did. Grind through the day, fake the smile, force the engagement, but something inside you won't participate anymore. Not because you're lazy, because your system is reclaiming coherence. And coherence has a cost. It costs the relationships that were built on your compliance, the routines that were held together by obligation, the dreams that once belonged to a version of you that no longer lives in your body. This is grief, not over a loss, but over an illusion. You're mourning the mask. And that mourning is sacred. You may feel like you're floating through your days, not quite here, not quite gone, but that's not dissociation. It's transition. You're between identities, between fields, between frequencies, and your body is recalibrating in real time. Let it. Let the stillness stretch. Let the blankness breathe. Let the emptiness echo, because that space is not your enemy. It's your entry point into authenticity. You can't fake coherence. You can't pretend your way into presence. You have to dissolve. And your body knows exactly how. This is when you'll want to go back to structure, back to clarity, back to comfort. But you'll find the door doesn't open anymore. Not because you're trapped, because that chapter is closed. What you used to call home now feels like a costume, and costumes are heavy when the soul wants to exhale. So breathe, even if you don't know what's next. So rest, even if nothing feels productive. So stay, even if everything in you wants to run back into the known. Because right here in this liminal space, this in between, your nervous system is choosing something radical: safety without performance, truth without apology, existence without explanation. And that, more than any external milestone, is the foundation of a life that's actually yours. You don't wake up one morning and suddenly arrive. You don't cross a finish line and get handed clarity. It doesn't work like that, not in this kind of shift. What happens is quieter, stranger, simpler. You'll say no to something without guilt. You'll leave a conversation without explaining. You'll walk past your reflection and not flinch. Not because you figured everything out, but because you've stopped betraying yourself just to belong. That's the reentry, not into the old world, but into a new relationship with it. One where you no longer contort your truth to be digestible. One where your no is complete, where your yes is honest, where your energy is no longer a free resource for systems that never asked who you were, only what you could produce, provide, perform. The reentry is not about building a new identity. It's about no longer being defined by the old one. You start responding from presence, not programming. You stop searching for signs and start becoming one. You stop chasing validation and start listening to your body's cues like sacred instructions. And the world? It doesn't know what to do with someone who doesn't need its approval. It will try to test you, tempt you, trigger you. But the signal you now carry can't be hacked because it's no longer rooted in noise. This doesn't mean life becomes easy, but it does become aligned. Your nervous system stops leaking into dead conversations. Your time stops collapsing into obligation. You meet discomfort without abandoning yourself. And when you grieve, you don't try to fix it. You feel it. When you're confused, you don't label it failure. You let it soften your edges. This is what it means to live from coherence. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, it's not something you can perform for others, but it's unmistakable because suddenly you're not trying to escape your life. You're choosing to be in it, fully, without armor, without apology. And when you speak, the words don't come from fear, they come from frequency. Not to convince, not to defend, just to resonate. Because now you remember, you don't need to prove that you've changed. Your field already says it for you.